I'm looking everywhere for my son. I just want my son to come home. I'm going to keep looking until we find my son.
Never going to give up on
I'm never going to give up on my baby, never.
Bring Mike home! Bring Mike home!
That was the mother, family, and friends of missing person Michael McClain, and you heard them say it, and they said it very simply. They just want to bring Mike home. Can we help them do that? It's time to turn on the searchlight for Michael McClain. Welcome to Brainscratch Searchlight. I am John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. Before we get into the story of Michael McClain and all the conditions surrounding his disappearance, we have an update from the case that we covered last week, and that was the case of Alexander Holden. It is unfortunate to have to say this, but his body has been found. Let's jump over to fox40.com for some more details. A witness spoke to Fox 40. He saw a flood of Sacramento police officers and crime scene investigators pour into a section of the American River Bike Trail on Sunday. Of course, that is the bike trail he was known to frequently run on, and we do believe he was heading off in that direction, according to some conversation that he might have had with his girlfriend or his other friends. Just to be very clear about it, at this point, police are saying they do not suspect any foul play situation. They're not being very clear about how they found him or what the conditions of his death may be, but they're being very clear. They don't think this is a foul play scenario. Sacramento police say at 3 p.m. they got a call from someone who was searching for Holden in the area, and they discovered a body. I think this is the third case in this very short year of 2020 where we've already had a body being found of a missing person by someone that was actually actively looking for them. Now, we've had two other ones where it's been family members. Here, we've got one where I believe it's just part of a search party, but I just want to put it out there. These efforts are so worth it. We're seeing it time and time again. People can be found when you get a bunch of caring people together and out there looking for them. Fox 40 reached out to Holden's father, Judge Calvin Holden. Here's a quote from him. "We were just told that he had been recovered. It was awe-inspiring. It just ends up with it didn't come out the way we wanted it to. But there was a lot of effort put in, and we want to thank everybody in Sacramento." Calvin Holden said he and Alex's mother will be taking Alex back to Missouri for funeral services on February 8th. "I want him to be remembered like he was, which is one of the most intelligent, compassionate, caring, loving people you would ever be around," said Calvin. That's all that's released at this time. Autopsy results seem to still be pending. We don't really know the final cause of death. I don't know if that information will be released. It kind of depends on the nature of what happened. But if there is any more details like that I think are important to the case, of course, I will let you guys know about them here on Searchlight. Let's move on to the case we are covering today, and that is the case of Michael, or Mike, McClain, who also has a couple of other nicknames. His father, in particular, refers to him as Man. I guess it started that he called him Little Man, and as Mike got older, he dropped the little, but he kept calling him Man. Crawlspace, my buddies Tim and Lance, did a really good interview with Michael's father and mother. Of course, I'll have a link to that in the description box down below with all the other sources that we're covering today. I'm going to try to weave in some of what came out through that interview as we're going through these sources as well. But let's learn a little bit about another nickname for him, Mike Nice. We can see for television shows, he was into the NBA. I can see he's got several NBA teams listed in his favorite section. Family Guy, BET, Jersey Shore, The Jamie Foxx Show. In terms of movies, he loves Juice, Love and Basketball, Friday After Next Friday, Scarface, The Hangover. For music, we've got all kinds of different artists: Reem, Dave East, Future, Pleasure P. And here, like I was mentioning, he's got a lot of sports teams he likes to follow, not just in basketball. We've also got the New York Yankees on here as well. So we can see just kind of a just seems like a normal, friendly, nice guy, pretty active with his community, has a lot of friends linked on his Facebook account. Let's figure out where this is going on. This is in Nashua, New Hampshire. And Nashua is a city in southern New Hampshire, United States. As of 2018, the population had risen to an estimated 89,246. That makes it the second largest city in the state. Nashua was twice named Best Place to Live in America in annual surveys conducted by Money Magazine. It won that in 1987 and again in 1998. Continuing to the NamUs profile, let's see what we can learn about this case. And from the descriptions I'm seeing, this picture of him might be more accurate than a lot of other photos. There's a lot of pictures of him out there, thankfully, but many of them don't have his hair in this particular style. And from what I'm seeing, this is the style that his hair was in when he was last seen. On the NamUs profile, we also get his name here. This is Michael Anthony McClain, a African-American male, 29 years old. I believe his birthday is actually, I think it's in about a week. So that would be his 30th birthday that is coming up. He stands at 5 foot 10 inches tall, weighs around 190 pounds. Date of last contact here, they have April 20th, 2019. Now that is a Saturday night, but from what we're hearing, they do have footage of him. They haven't released it publicly, which is kind of a question I have in all this. I don't know why they wouldn't. They do have footage of him at a McDonald's, but that was actually taken at around, they're saying somewhere around 2 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. So that would be on April 21st. So date of last contact, I know here they have it April 20th, but I believe it's actually the 21st. For circumstances of disappearance, Mike was last spotted on surveillance at McDonald's after leaving the Tropical Lounge nightclub in Nashua. It is not known why he left his friends at the club. I think we're going to get a decent understanding of that as we go through the news stories. But let's continue. For head hair description, they have his hair color as black, and you can see that it was in braids or cornrows at the time that he went missing. It also notes that he has a goatee, he has brown eyes, but he does sometimes wear green contacts. They also talk about multiple tattoos on his hands and arms. Surprisingly, and I really don't understand why, we have no clothing description here. We know that he went to that lounge with a few friends, so I'm just very curious why we don't have a clothing description. We know that they have surveillance footage of him at McDonald's, so once again, why we don't have a clothing description, I don't necessarily understand. For images here, they just have several different pictures of his face, no real shots of his tattoo work. They do have some contact information here. Of course, I'll have that in the description box below, including the case ID number. I just wanted to stop here at this missing poster so you can see his right arm in particular looks like there is a lot of tattoo work on it. I don't know if that... It's weird. It kind of says, I think it says justice in the middle of that tattoo work, and that would actually make sense with his major. We're going to learn about that as we roll forward a little bit. I've seen pictures of his left arm. There are a few tattoos on there too, but I don't think it's kind of as fully sleeved as his right arm is. Let's get a little more detail just from this description on the missing poster. He went to the Tropical Lounge nightclub in Nashua with friends on the evening of April 20th, 2019. An altercation between two female patrons occurred outside the venue, and Michael attempted to help defuse the situation. When the altercation was over, Michael ended up separated from his friends. It's not known how they became separated. So we're getting a little bit more detail here. I can tell you from some other postings I've seen about this case, many of them say that there was an altercation that happened at the lounge, but he didn't have anything to do with it. His father on the Crawlspace or Missing Maura podcast was a bit more clear about it, and it seems that he might have not had to do with the actual fight, but he did know one of the girls that was in the fight. I think he was dancing with her earlier. His father also said something about there might have been a possibility that her ex-boyfriend was at the club that night as well. So while he might not be involved in the actual whatever started the fight, he does know one of the girls, and it seems like he tried to break it up. He tried to help separate them when the fight was going on. Let's continue over at londonderrynh.net with a little more detail and learn a little bit more about who Michael is. McClain's parents say their son, nicknamed Mike Nice by many, has been working with autistic children at the nonprofit Easter Seals in Manchester since he graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So I do think that's probably justice written on his right arm. A Stamford, Connecticut native, McClain has lived in Manchester the past 7 years after attending the now closed Mount Washington College. His family says his disappearance is highly out of character. Here's a quote from his father, Edward. "This is a dream, a nightmare, and we are just hoping we can wake up from this." So I've heard the term Easter Seals. I know that they're a charitable organization, but I didn't know too much about them. I just wanted to do a quick stop here so we could learn about them a little more together. As America's largest nonprofit healthcare organization, Easter Seals is committed to the comprehensive health and wellness of the more than 1.4 million people it serves each year, and is prepared to respond to the needs of the 1 in 4 Americans living with a disability today. So that's the organization that he's working with autistic children. This is another one of those cases where I have to say we can't lose people like this. People that would dedicate their time and their lives in this direction. We need more people like Mike. Additionally, we've served transitioning military veterans and their families and caregivers. In the spring of 1934, the organization launched its first Easter Seals campaign to raise money for its services. To show their support, donors placed the seals on envelopes and letters. The overwhelming public support for the Easter Seals campaign triggered a nationwide expansion of the organization and a swell of grassroots efforts on behalf of people with disabilities. So a wonderful organization, and it sounds like a really nice guy that's working for them. Where is he? Let's continue over at StamfordAdvocate.com with some more information. Mike McClain went out with 2 friends to the Tropical Lounge in Nashua on Saturday night. And just to be clear, Nashua is about 20 minutes south of where he was actually living. We'll pull up a map in a moment here. A fight took place that he was not involved in, and when the crowd dispersed, he was gone, the family said on a missing persons poster. The poster also read, "Friends waited 45 minutes and drove back to Manchester, New Hampshire without him." Ben Harris, McClain's best friend and roommate, was in Boston. He said McClain was last spotted at a McDonald's. "I'm trying to figure out what happened," he said. "I'm just trying to figure out more. I want people to come forward and help me." And of course, that's why we put the contact information in the description box for every single case that we cover on this channel. If you have information about Mike and what happened to him that night, please use that contact information. Harris said texts from McClain, who graduated from Stanford High School in 2008, were sent to his work supervisor, and they seemed to indicate he was in distress and believed someone was following him. "We just really need to know what happened that night, what's really going on," Harris said. So his father on the Crawlspace podcast seems to have some differing information about that. There are several texts. It seems like some of them are kind of not written properly. And of course, that makes you wonder about his state of mind. Is he, did he have a few too many when he was at the lounge? Or is he kind of in distress as he's trying to write these things? We're going to have a few examples of those as we go forward. But his father did seem to indicate that there was a phone call, I believe, to his work supervisor, who is someone that Michael would typically reach out for if he needed help, like if he needed a ride home from a bar or something like that. But his father also said the text messages, I believe, were going to someone else. I don't think those were going necessarily to his work supervisor. His work supervisor was trying to text him because they were kind of like, she missed the first phone call, and then she was texting him, and I don't think he was replying at that time. And then I do believe they got on the phone just for a minute or two. So there's some other communication that's going on around here. And his father is just wondering, is he planning this communication, or is he just fumbling with his phone trying to get to the first person, especially when you hear of the conversation that he did have with his supervisor? But we will get there as we go through the articles here. Jumping over to WMUR.com, police said friends who were with him Saturday night told officers they went looking for him but couldn't find him. The friends also said McClain's car was still parked on Orange Street in Nashua after he went missing, and that they were unable to reach him by phone. So we've got them. They say they've hung out for 45 minutes. Obviously, they were trying to look for him, couldn't find him. I guess they then go back to where their car is parked and take off, and they notice that his car is also still there. There is one little discrepancy we're going to bump into about his car. I don't know if it's just a misunderstanding on the family's part. Most of the sources that I'm seeing say that his car was actually out there and it was parked on Orange Street. Continuing over at boston.cbslocal.com, he went to a nearby McDonald's and was last seen on surveillance video there around 2:30 a.m. Sunday, April 21st. And this is a shot of the McDonald's. Of course, we're going to get to the map here too. McClain lives in Manchester, New Hampshire. His friends and relatives spent Saturday looking all around Nashua and hanging up posters. We've been everywhere, near rivers, near underpasses, woods, wooded areas along the highways, so forth, like that, knocking on doors and questioning businesses and so forth. Edward McClain, Michael's father, said, very tough on everyone here. I'm sure it is, and I'm sure it has not gotten any better. We're now coming up on 9 or 10 months of Michael missing, and from what I'm seeing here, not a lot of answers. So I've pulled together a map for you guys. This is Manchester up here, and then directly south of that we have Nashua. So the distance between the two, I think it's about 17 or 18 miles. He drives down, sounds like he's driving his own vehicle, and parks it on Orange Street. Orange Street is then approximately, it's about a mile from Orange Street to the Tropical Lounge. So a little bit of a walk, probably about a 20-minute walk or so. I don't know if Orange Street was possibly where one of his friends lived or something like that. That might explain a little bit of the discrepancy that I told you guys that we're going to bump into about where his car is. But one way or another, seems like his vehicle's left at Orange Street. He goes to the Tropical Lounge. And from there, directly down the street from the Tropical Lounge, we can see is the McDonald's that he was spotted at. And that is approximately half a mile. So we're talking about what typically should be a 10-minute walk. If you're being followed by someone, you might walk a little faster. So that could be more of like a 7-minute walk at that point, depending on, if he was running or sprinting, he could certainly get there a lot faster than that. But not a whole lot of time would really be passing between him leaving the Tropical Lounge and then getting to McDonald's, unless he's not going directly there. And we're going to hear some information about that as well. So the Tropical Lounge, I kept seeing references to it. I believe it has closed at this point and has reopened as another club called the Opus Lounge. I was looking into it because the time frames that I'm seeing for this case keep talking about things happening kind of around the 2 o'clock range and him being at McDonald's somewhere from 2 to 2:30. From what I can tell in New Hampshire, you're not supposed to serve alcohol after 1. So I came here to try to find the lounge just to see what their normal hours are, and they close at 1:30. So what I'm wondering is, do they do last call effectively at 1, serve those last round of drinks, and then cut off the bar access, and then give people a half an hour to still hang out in the lounge or the club to finish off their drinks and get themselves together and get headed home? So that kind of makes sense with the time frame that we're hearing about. Some of the text messages, it seemed like, were happening leading up to the 2 o'clock hour. So certainly if the club was open till 1:30, maybe then they were forcing everyone out, then the fight breaks out outside, something along those lines. The time frame starts to look right to me. Let's continue over at another article at WMUR.com. Family and friends of a Manchester man missing for 11 days gathered for a vigil at a Nashua park in his honor Thursday night. McClain works with children at Eastersills in Manchester. Co-workers said he's missed there. I saw the genuine, said Nancy Raimundo. I saw how he loved the kids. I saw how he was a genuine person. McClain's best friend said they can't reach him by phone or find any clues as they search every day. Nashua police said on Thursday there were no new leads in this case. I've seen some quotes from, I don't know if it's a detective or a sergeant, but someone from the police department. And effectively the quotes are always, we don't have anything to report. This is still an active investigation. And that's about it. And I'm just wondering about that because I've seen a lot of missing persons cases. I've seen a lot of different methods be used to try to help those cases. And some of the things that I think are kind of typical for missing persons cases, I'm not seeing here. And admittedly, I've seen police departments respond in very different ways, particularly with how they give information to the media or to the public. I did go looking at Nashua Police Department to see if they have a public information officer, because quite honestly, with what I'm seeing here in the press, it doesn't seem like they do. At least through my look on their website, it doesn't look like they do. And that's a little bit of, I don't know. I'm trying not to be too critical about what they're doing here, but I just think for a missing person investigation, getting information out that can help raise exposure and then help the public know how they're supposed to help the police is a critical aspect. And that's why I'm wondering about why we have a case where we're talking about surveillance footage, and supposedly they have surveillance footage not only from McDonald's, but 2 other locations where he was. And none of that has been released publicly. The family, at least according to what his father says, hasn't even really seen the footage. They've been shown kind of screenshots of the footage here or there for very brief moments. I just don't know why that information isn't being publicized better. It could only help this case. And yes, I know that occasionally you have to protect the integrity of an investigation if you think there's a foul play situation going on. And here, with comments that he made to his supervisor, we can certainly be concerned that there's some type of foul play situation going on here. Is that really what the police are thinking? We're going to get some comments by the end of this video that makes me not too sure that they're really looking at this case through that lens. But let's continue with another article over at NashuaTelegraph.com. More than 4 months have passed since Michael McClain disappeared in the area of East Hollis Street, and Nashua police still are not talking about the case. Edward McClain said Nashua Police Department officials have communicated with the family very little in the last 4 months. He said the only updates he or Michael's mother receive are when they initiate a call to police. I hear about this far too often, and I do have to at least point out the situation he's explaining here is not abnormal. There seems to be this hot spot for a case like this, 30 to 60 days, where you really get what seems like good communication and cooperation happening with the police department. But once you get outside that window, I hear this very often. Family members having to call in. Usually they'll assign a point person. Sometimes I'll even hear about investigators telling family, hey, stop calling me. I'm only going to talk to one of your family members, something like that. Of course, we want to figure out mechanisms to collaborate with them and work with them in the best way. I would like to think that Edward is probably the point person on this case, but even he's saying that, you know, it's been tough to communicate with the police department. Here's a quote from him. "I gave up calling," McClain said. "I email. It's process. It's a psychological strain, an emotional strain. I shouldn't be calling them constantly. Give me a call once a month, every 2 or 3 weeks. Give me something." Nothing. And like I said, I hear things like this, but at the bottom of this article, puts it kind of bluntly, Nashua police did not return a phone call seeking comment. Jumping over to unionleader.com, there's been no activity on his social media accounts or credit cards. So effectively, I do hear about a cell phone ping that seems to happen at that McDonald's, and then his cell phone stops there. So I don't know if it's taken from him, if it's damaged, if the battery runs out, something happens to his cell phone at the McDonald's. His father also states that, at least from what they're hearing from employees that were working at the McDonald's, it seems like Michael actually stayed there for a bit and may have even ordered something to eat. Now, his father's also clear that he's not hearing from investigators that they've actually pinpointed Michael's purchase. Like, was he only buying food for himself? Was he there with someone? Was he buying food for more than one person? His father's curious why they can't do that, because obviously they've got the cell phone ping, so they've got a decent time frame. McDonald's, I think, have a ton of cameras, including cameras on their counters. So why wouldn't they be able to pinpoint the exact transaction and then provide documentation about how he paid, for instance? Apparently, they're not seeing anything on his credit cards or debit cards that coincides with that purchase either. Of course, he could have used cash, but it'd be nice if the family had some answers to all this kind of stuff, and they don't. Let's get some more details here. From pretty much the family has become the main source of information on this case, and I don't know if that's the best mechanism for a case like this. I think it's very important for the family to share what they're going through and to share insights about the missing person. I think that's critical for helping the public help them and help the authorities. But it's always good when you have the authorities also putting out information, so that can help kind of course correct, because sometimes the family can get very focused on one particular theory, and sometimes all the facts start kind of bending towards that. Of course, law enforcement is a bit better about not doing that because they're trained to not necessarily do that, to stay objective and to really let the information lead them instead of them driving the information. Family doesn't have any training like that, but they're our best source in this case, by far. According to his father, there was an altercation between two young ladies at the nightclub that night, which escalated outside of the nightclub. McClain knew one of the women and was trying to separate the two individuals. So saying that he wasn't involved in the altercation at all, I get that he wasn't part of what started the fight, but he certainly got in the middle of it if he's separating the two women that are literally fighting. Could that have upset someone else that was there, maybe a friend of one of the women that was fighting, and then they were mad at him? I think we really need to keep those considerations in play in a case like this. Police had arrived on scene and were urging people to disperse, at which point McClain did not return to the club. Authorities found footage of McClain walking on West Hollis Street and making a quick beeline onto Eldridge Street, a small alleyway, according to Edward McClain, his father. So here's a map with the walking path that his father believes that he took. We've got the Tropical Lounge here. So essentially he's walking up to the next full intersection and then he cuts a quick left. What's interesting about that to me is he's walking right by City Hall. There's a bank on the right. I'm just wondering, are there cameras that actually support that he did walk up to Eldridge Street? I know one of his text messages specifically mentions Eldridge, so that might be where his father is really coming to this idea that he was on Eldridge at some point. But it does look like he could have possibly bumped up to Eldridge, would have had to have come back down to Hollis, and that walking pattern doesn't really make sense if you're just walking down the street, hey, I'm going to go to McDonald's. Now, considering his car is parked north of here, it might make sense if he was walking on Main Street and then would have continued on Main Street, because that would literally take him across the Nashua River and get him back into that neighborhood where his car is. But he doesn't quite do that because we know that he winds up at the McDonald's way over here on the east. So it seems to suggest to me that he might have been concerned that someone was following him. Maybe that's why he cut up the street and then cut across again. But was he still concerned about that after he got to McDonald's, seemingly spent some time there, even had a meal there? This is a 24-hour McDonald's. He could have stayed there all night if he wanted to, if he was really concerned about his safety. So it's weird because at the start of this, I'm really looking at, we've got a fight that's going on. He's breaking it up. He knows one of the girls. A lot of potential for some type of conflict to happen here. We've got multiple text messages where it looks like he's not really writing the right words. So is he possibly intoxicated? He's worried about someone following him. He's reaching out to people, seemingly asking for some type of assistance. I think even the text message about Eldridge is to tell someone where he is at that time. But then does it all diffuse? Does he figure out he's not being followed? And then he kind of cools back down and decides he's going to cut over to this McDonald's. I don't know. I just don't know what motivates him to go away from where his car is parked. And if he was going from the Tropical Lounge directly to McDonald's because he was hungry or something like that, he did a bit of a strange turn. Is it possible that, maybe he had a little too much to drink and that's what was motivating his movements? I don't know. But the other thing his father likes to point out is, look at this street. It's barely a street. It's more like an alley. And what would drive you to come up to this street when you're walking on a main street back down here where there's probably a lot more traffic, a lot more businesses, and if you are seriously in trouble, probably a lot more places that you can find to run into and maybe protect yourself. I don't know. because I don't feel like that about this little alley back here. But let's continue with more information at the article. Edward McClain said that shortly before 2 a.m., his son called his boss and told her, "They are following me, more than one." When she tried to reestablish connection with him, when there was no answer, 3 cryptic text messages were also sent from Mike McClain's phone to his neighbor. One stating, "Help, LOL, hour." The second stating, "What stood aloof?" And the last stating, "Eldridge, bro." I don't know why these words are so far off. I don't know if autocorrect is wreaking havoc on what he's trying to write. There is another message that this article is not talking about, but essentially his father believes that it was a message saying F you, B word. And I don't know, because the B word is severely mangled. It's kind of an assumption. The F word is spelled properly. The U isn't even correct. It's actually an I. So, but if you look at a keyboard, U and I are right next to each other. So I can certainly see your finger hitting the wrong one there. But very strange that we get these weird text messages. We get this phone call, pretty direct. "They're following me, more than one." Who's he referring to? We don't know. His parents believe that after the visit to McDonald's, their son may have attempted to make a phone call at a gas station on East Hollis Street. They believe it was a Speedway gas station. I'll bring up a map on that soon. And later entered and exited the residences at Riverfront Landing apartment complex on Bancroft Street. What's very concerning about that is we've got the word riverfront, and that's for a good reason. It's literally right next to a pretty significant river. Lieutenant Daniel Medeiros said Thursday, "The McClain case is still an open investigation, and the Nashua Police Department has no further updates for the media at this point." His parents, who live in Connecticut, have traveled to New Hampshire several times since that night seeking answers. Since 5 months have passed and they still have no answers, the parents worry that people may not be aware he is missing, or the case may not be getting the attention it deserves. Do they have a good reason to think that? Keep that in mind. The hope is there. Miracles do happen. "We're waiting for him to come home," said his father, Edward McClain. "Maybe someone knows something, saw something, or remembers something. We need answers. We need to know where he is." So here is a map with the full path. And I know that article said that that's what his family thinks. In the Crawlspace podcast, he was very clear about that's what he's being told by law enforcement. He's been told by law enforcement that they do have footage of him at this Speedway, which is just a little bit past the McDonald's. You can see the McDonald's here, the Speedway here, and then continuing to the residences at Riverfront Landing way out over here. The total distance that we're talking about from the lounge to the last place where he's supposedly seen on camera at the riverfront is 1.2 miles. That's literally, even if he's walking leisurely, that could be a 20-minute walk. What I'm concerned about is when his father's talking about the sighting at the residences, it sounds more like that's even later into the morning, somewhere around the 3 a.m. to maybe even 3:30 range. That's a lot of time that's going on here, and I don't know if he's interfacing with someone. Does he meet up with someone at some point? It doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of the time frame. But of course, his father also mentioned that, when he was shown pictures once again of the footage, he was having trouble getting the time from the pictures because it looks like the police officers had taken the screenshot from an angle where it was possibly obstructing the time code or something. So we're not real firm on the time frame here for the residences at Riverfront Landing sighting. But apparently he was seen there again. And of course, whenever we're talking about a missing persons case and we see a water source like this, we've got the Merrimack River that is running from north to south here. And it looks like the Nashua River, which actually runs into it. Big cause for concern. We do see many cases. How many times have I said the story on this channel? Man goes out, drinks with friends, leaves the friends, goes walking off on his own, is found later in a river. I mean, it happens time and time again. We've already talked about the stats from the Center for Disease Control about men drowning. It's way higher. I still don't understand why, but it is. And then when you add alcohol to that, it gets even higher. His father does note there's some problems with that theory because of what is essentially between where these apartments are and the water. There's a lot of different surfaces and kind of a water break that's going on there. So he would have had to have walked over some pretty significant terrain to try to even get to the point of being in the water. And they're not sure that he did that. His father doesn't really believe that that's what is going on with this case. Jumping over to NBCnews.com, a quote from his mother, Paula Judkins. I pray that I'll open my eyes tomorrow and he'll be back. I haven't given up hope that he's alive and that he'll come home to us. Mike's father believes his son left the area on foot because his car was back at a friend's house in Manchester. Now, this is the one quote that is throwing a little bit of a twist in this story. I don't think it's at his friend's house in Manchester. I have a feeling he had a friend that might have been living in that Orange Street area, and that's where his car was left. This is the only reference I've seen that makes it sound like his car wasn't close to the location of the bar that night. And I think it's just a goof on their part about the location. I don't think it's in Manchester. I think his friend lives closer to the bar. But that's an assumption that I'm making. I'm just trying to make sense out of it because this is the only place where I see something that makes it sound like his car wasn't there. Paula said the last 5 months have been a struggle, but she's trying to be strong for her 13-year-old daughter. When you're a mom, your child is your world, and right now my world is falling apart. But I got to keep on for my daughter and for Mike. I'm holding on to my faith. Despite the fact that I've covered so many cases where we've told that same simple story of a man walking out of a bar, leaving his friends, and winding up in a body of water, we can never give up hope. And there are other outcomes. That isn't always the outcome, despite whatever you can say about the statistics of it and what might or might not be more likely. You never know until you know. But here we hear some, to me, it's heartbreaking information from the family about what their experience has been with the police and maybe what theory the police are actually operating on when it comes to this case. Over at news12.com from September 22nd, 2019. The family of a missing Stanford man believes their loved one is still alive, even though authorities say he drowned. But McClain's family says that because his body was never recovered and he's a good swimmer, they have no faith in the conclusions of the official investigation. 30 family members came together outside the Margaret E. Morton Government Center to hold a vigil and ask officials or anybody who will listen for help. It's 5 months now and my baby's still out there, said Paula Judkins, McClain's mother, and nobody's looking for him. And I just want to share an additional clip from the family with you about this right now.
A sneaker, a hat, something, cell phone, nothing has been found to this day.
I feel because my son is a young black man missing up in New Hampshire that they're not making him a priority. He's a human being too, and he deserves coverage like everybody else.
Police in New Hampshire have not returned calls from News 12 Connecticut.
Is that really what's going on with this case? Is this the story of police not investigating the case because we're talking about a missing African American? I can't tell you for sure. I do have some information that might show that's not necessarily what's going on here. This is from usnews.com and was published just a few days ago. The police department in Nashua, New Hampshire says it's currently short 18 officers, and money that would be available to hire additional employees is going to overtime costs. Now they have a quote here from Police Chief Michael Carignan. He said that the department has had to cut back on an officer in the lobby to take reports as people enter, like simple stolen wallet reports. Another position has been cut that is a patrol officer who drives up and down Main Street. Another officer has been removed from the downtown area, given that fewer people are out in the cold weather, and cuts have been made to internal programs such as evidence management. We will not be filling a detective position until at least next fiscal year because of the management of the money, he added. So could that be affecting this case? I certainly think so. The types of cuts they're talking about, first of all, that cop that they cut from Main Street, Main Street's one of the streets that we think he went walking on that night. Not that it would have helped in this particular case. I realize that this news is, coming quite a bit after, so that cut probably didn't happen yet. But if we're talking about safety in the area, we're talking about what's going on there. Them not refilling a detective position, could that affect Michael's case? I think certainly. The thing that kind of scared me the most is evidence management. Cutting employees from evidence management. Did he really have fat to trim there? Keep in mind, this is a department that when I went looking into it, I couldn't even find a public information officer. So, and there's something very scary to me about this whole, we can't afford to hire new police officers because we're paying so much in overtime. How do you ever get out of that problem? It's like, trying to take buckets to a house fire. I don't get how you overcome that. So it's interesting to me. Now, admittedly, this police chief is new. He's been put into the position since Michael's disappearance, but there is a write-up about him over on the Nashua Police Department website, and it's got a couple quotes I want to share with you guys. And maybe if Michael's family's seeing this, you might want to take him up on this. It's important that every person who lives, works, or travels through Nashua feels confident that they can contact the Nashua Police Department to request help. They can be assured they will always receive a professional and best practice policing response. Not having someone in your police station to take walk-ins, I don't know. I think that statement is already being blown out the window, is my opinion. But he makes a big promise here. You have my commitment to be a chief of good character and to always maintain your trust. I am committed to make myself accessible to the public to openly discuss any issues or concerns. I was thinking we might find an email address here for him with a statement like that, but we don't. However, I believe Michael's family probably knows the number for the Nashua Police Department. I don't know if they've tried reaching out to the new chief there, and keeping in mind that he is new, and obviously he's got some big challenges with that news article that we saw there. But in the context of that conversation, them talking about, hey, we've had our son missing out here, we don't feel like the proper attention's been given to it. How is the police chief going to deny that? I don't think you could. So at that point, if you could at least get the conversation there, maybe you could bump it forward to, okay, we understand where you guys have been, but we've still got our son missing. How do we move forward on this? And how do we find out where he is? And, it's nice to know what your investigators think about the possibility of him being in the water. That's fine. I haven't found any information here about sonar searches that have been done in that river. There's one of his family members in a video clip that's talking about where are the cadaver dogs? Where are people going up and down the river trying to find him? All very, very good points. So how do we get to that next step? How do we help this family find Michael? If the police are right, then let's take the steps to prove them right. If they're not, let's take the steps to process this case and to try to figure out, was someone following him? Is there possibly another stop that he was making that night? Let's find out if that time frame really holds up, really makes sense. And most importantly, let's share some information with the public that can help. I mean, seriously. One of the cases I'm most famous for is a case that blew up because of an elevator video, a person in an elevator. I think we could see a similar thing happen here if there was footage always grabs people's attention. If they would simply release some clips, the whole news cycle on this would absolutely explode with that news. Footage of missing man. And if they can even prove, hey, no one was following him. Here's the footage of, we've got him walking into McDonald's. No one's coming in after him. Or we've got footage of him walking down the street. He's looking at his phone. We have 30 minutes of that footage from after he walks by. You can watch it for yourself. There's no one following him. That's fine. And it's not about trying to prove anyone right or wrong. It's about trying to get the right details out there so the public knows how to help. And that's just something where I can't say that this is the best case that I've seen for that. And it really makes my heart hurt for the family. So once again, just a quick reminder, the Missing Maura Murray podcast, or also Crawlspace, I think they might have dropped it on both of their feeds. The episode is called Missing Michael McClain, but I'll have a link to the podcast at apple.com version down below. Also wanted to give a little shout out to a YouTuber that's getting into this true crime thing. I found her video on this case a while ago, reached out to her, told her I thought she was doing a good job. If you guys are looking for someone else in this true crime realm, please give a quick look at Rachel Shannon. See if you like her stuff, and if you do, please subscribe. I got to tell you, I was really impressed by the research that she did for her piece. And in terms of her delivery, I kind of put it in between. There's something about her that kind of reminds me of Kaylee Elise, and her presentation style also has a little Danielle Hallen. If that sounds like your type of thing, you might want to check out her channel. There is also a Web Sleuths thread. It's not very big, only 2 pages on it, but I'll include that in the links down below. Before we get out of today's video, though, I want to share a quote from findmikemclain.com. His mother puts quotes here very often. This is the most recent one, and you can see there's actually a picture of him graduating with his family. December 27th, 2019. Good morning, my love. We miss you so much. Well, the billboard is up. Let's see what happens. The holidays are not the same without you. See you soon. Love, Mom. And they also have a really good media section here with plenty of pictures of him. Once again, you can see more of his artwork here. Like I was telling you, on his left arm, doesn't look like there's as much. You can see there's a little bit just on the inside of his left arm there. Plenty of photos of Michael for you to come and review in case maybe you thought you saw him out there somewhere. Or maybe you want to come check him out, and maybe those will jog a memory for you about being in the area. If you have friends in New Hampshire, please share this video with them. Let's raise exposure to this case and keep everyone talking and thinking about Michael McClain. Before I end today's video, I need to thank a few new patrons, starting with Paula M. Rockwell. Thank you so much, Paula. And Jillian Tague. Thank you so much, Jillian. On top of that, Christina Arvai increased her pledge. Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate that. If you'd like to support the channel, you can head over to www.lordenarts.com, join Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merch. All of it helps keep me here doing what I love doing, helping families in these positions. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here on Friday with a brand new episode of Brainscratch on the Lorden Arts channel.